to the Mark Prater podcast, where our aim is to connect our global family of Sovereign Grace churches with our executive director. Mark, everyone who's watching this or reading this podcast is likely aware that the headlines are full of all manner of technological advancements about social media, artificial intelligence. And while pastors don't need to be experts about everything that's going on, I think it's wise for pastors to be informed about technology that is as it advances and the impact it has on our folks and our lives as believers. And you have a resource that you've been reading that you want to talk about with us today.
I do, and I think that's a great encouragement. I think we as pastors need to be informed in the area of technology because we all interact with it. It all pushes into our lives, and it can raise both theological and even ethical questions. So I'm reading, just about finished with God, Technology, and the Christian Life, a book that's been written by Tony Reinke. Tony's a very good writer, and this book is an excellent resource. I would encourage anyone listening or reading this podcast to get this book and read it, whether you're a pastor or not, because it will really, really help you. And the reason I'm reading the book, partly just interest, but I lead a faith and work Bible and book study at Covenant Fellowship Church. And as we talked about our next book to read, which we're actually reading right now, we chose this one, God, Technology, and the Christian Life by Tony Reinke, because in the workplace, technology, you interact with it all the time, and the emergence and the rapid progression of artificial intelligence, AI, is making its way in the workplace as well. So it's raising theological questions and ethical questions for members of my church as they interact with technology and AI in particular in the workplace. And beyond that, just some of the headlines that we read regarding AI, they can strike fear. The worst case doomsday scenario that robots will take over the world type of fear. They can also just raise ethical questions. I just read recently that the writer's strike in Hollywood, in part, what they're negotiating is the emergence of AI, who are writing scripts for television shows and movies. And of course, the writers, the union for the writers wants that to stop. And Hollywood producers or that industry is saying, we're not so sure we want to stop it. We want to leave room for that. So just some examples of how AI is beginning to emerge because it has progressed fairly rapidly. And there are ethical questions surrounding that we need to answer as Christians. But to be able to answer the ethical questions, we need to have a good theological understanding of technology and how God views it and how it's supposed to work in our life, which is the reason that Tony wrote this book.
Yeah, that's excellent. I'm looking forward to reading the book. I'm preparing actually this fall to do a class on technology and the Christian life. I mean, you're highlighting some important concerns about technology, but there's also pastoral concerns, the soul eroding effect of smartphone addiction, and what might happen, the untrustworthiness of AI generated content, and all of those kinds of things, virtual reality. So it is important for us to understand. And what is it about the book that you're enjoying? What are some highlights for you for us to take away?
Yeah, I think probably the best way to answer that question is just kind of go through the progression of the book. The first chapter is entitled "What is Technology?" And so what he does is he defines technology, and then he gives a very concise definition. But then he goes to the Bible and basically shows us that God made technology, and he begins with what he calls tar. That Noah actually used tar to seal the boat when he built the ark, and that was the emergence of beginning, at least early in the Bible, of there's technology there, and he just progresses that, and then I think he does a very good job next of developing a theology of technology. He does that in chapter 2. And kind of in 3 as well. But chapter 2, what is God's relationship to technology? And he springs from the creation account, as I just mentioned. He also springs from a passage in Isaiah that just builds a theology of technology that would include all that we have is given to us by God. And so any development of technology is something that comes from what God has already given us. He also just does a great job from the Isaiah passage of saying, look, God made the blacksmiths that made weapons. He He made the Ravengers, he calls them, who use the swords, and he rules over both of them. So he establishes over and over, and he repeats this theme: the sovereignty of God over technology. And that doesn't mean that technology can't be used for evil, but it's not beyond the scope of the sovereignty of God, which I think is a very important theological point for anyone, but especially Christians, so that we can counter the fear of where AI could go with the realization it's not going to go any further than God allows. And that's kind of what Tony is saying. So there's much more to his theology of technology. It's the best that I've read. He devotes a chapter of where does technology come from. I've already mentioned that it comes from what God has already given us. So any new human innovation, ultimately, man can't take credit for. Any new human innovation, God gets all the glory for, because all that we innovate comes from what God has already given us. And then he does a really good job in a couple of chapters of just contrasting the gospel of Jesus Christ to the gospel of technology. And one of the ways that he does that, the gospel of technology sort of pushes against death, meaning that we want to find ways to prolong life, that we can somehow develop a technology, whether that's medication or some technology that stops the aging process or slows down the aging process. So we push against death, and that's not the gospel of Jesus Christ. The gospel of Jesus Christ is very clear that we will die because death is the penalty of sin. But here's the good news: we have a Savior who defeated death through his death on the cross and resurrection, and those who trust in him will die physically, but we will live forever with Christ. And so it's a great contrast of the gospel of technology and the gospel of Jesus Christ. And then he ends the book by it's the last chapter: how should we use technology? It's a really helpful chapter. He ends it by giving 14 ethical convictions for you to consider as it relates to technology. So he gets very practical there. And because technology raises ethical questions, it's good for us as Christians to have ethical convictions, to know how do we respond to the rapid progression of technology. So it's a book I would highly recommend. Just some of the ways I'm benefiting from it, the group that I'm leading at Covenant Fellowship is benefiting from it. And I would just encourage anyone reading or listening to this podcast to read this book, God, Technology, and the Christian Life.
It sounds excellent. I'm reminded of Proverbs 25:2 that says, "It is the glory of God to conceal things, but the glory of kings is to search things out." It's just wonderful how God has concealed, hidden within the created order, all of these materials to turn stand into smartphones, for instance. And so that's a wonderful gift. But yes, thanks for recommending a resource to help us to be wise in how we navigate through technological advancement. And
let me just mention one other thing, and I think it's at the fear point. It's an excellent point that Tony makes in the book. So we can read about technology. There can be this fear that technology is going to overtake us or overtake the world. And he's making the point that, of course, technology can be used for evil, but even then, God redeems it. And he uses the cross actually as an illustration. He said he made the blacksmith that then made the nails, and those nails were used by evil men to crucify Jesus Christ. So even though technology was used for an evil purpose in that moment, God was using it redemptively to save sinners like you and me through Christ's death on the cross. So we shouldn't fear, because our God is in control, and he is good, and uses all things for his good redemptive purposes.
That's fantastic. Well, thank you, Mark, for the recommendation. Thank you all for watching or reading. We'll see you here next week, Lord willing. Bye for now.
Thank you for watching. If you have questions or comments, Mark would love to hear from you. For more videos like this, hit subscribe on YouTube or by email at markkprater.com.